Hello, everybody. What's going on, family? Welcome to episode 59 of the podcast. 59, baby. That's a sacred number. That is a sacred number, episode 59. Hey, my guest today is one of my favorite guests to have on the podcast. I met him a year and a half ago. He's been on once early on in the early days of the pod, and he came through today. Dr. Gary Shlifer. Amazing dude. Super knowledgeable. Practices a type of medicine that is preventative. As in be healthy now so you don't have to get sick later instead of wait till you get sick and then learn how to be healthy. Has an amazing knowledge of all things medicine, ancestral medicine. We had a great conversation that started with vaccines. We talked about a lot of the COVID stuff that's been going on and the information that gets shared regarding COVID, as well as the lasting impacts of what this pandemic could bring, what could be happening in the future, how to take care of your body. Talked about meat, greens, toxins, and taking advantage of ancient knowledge and ancestral knowledge that can be practiced today to help you live a happier, healthier life. Wonderful knowledge bombs on this episode of the podcast, which is brought to you by Cognibiotics from Bioptimizers, my favorite supplement company. Cognibiotics is a mind and mood enhancing probiotic made from natural herbs and ingredients that work with your gut biome to make a happier body, make you happier, dude, make you better, make you feel better, make you less shitty. I'm not good at reading ads. We know this by now, but I love these, and I take them every day. Get a discount and a free book called The Biological Optimization Blueprint when you go to cognibiotics.com/Brent Pella. That is the URL, and it's great. It's great. I highly recommend. 2 a day, probiotic, nootropic, helps your brain-gut connection, which is a legit thing, and highly recommend them. Cognibiotics from Bioptimizers. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Blue Blocks, my favorite blue light blocking glasses. Get 15% off at blueblocks.com/Brent using promo code Brent. I legit use these every night, and I have had a significantly better time falling asleep and staying asleep because my eyes aren't numb from staring at a screen all night, because these glasses block the artificial blue light from digital devices. So get 15% off at blueblocks.com/Brent, BLUBLOX.com/Brent. Now, let's get into it, because this episode was awesome and is full of really cool knowledge and insight that I really hope you guys will take and appreciate and enjoy. So please enjoy this episode of the podcast with my good buddy, Dr. Gary Shlifer. My buddy is
cool.
He's an artist and he's an actor, artist, and a wood craftsman.
Yeah.
And he told me about this table design that he had. He showed me a picture of one that he did, and I was like, oh, dude, we got to make something like that. And so I came to him with the idea to put these shoes in it, because these are the shoes that I got my first year working at Kobe Bryant's basketball camp.
There you go.
So they have a lot of history. They were also the best basketball shoe I've ever worn. And so he sketched up an idea when I went to meet up with him, and I was like, yeah, we have to do that. And he made it, and it's the only one of its kind that exists.
Yeah. This is amazing.
Isn't it cool?
It's fucking cool.
Eucalyptus wood, resin.
I love it.
Yeah, man, he killed it. He killed it. And now he wants to license the design to some big companies. He's gonna make millions of dollars.
So people throw in their shoes, and then they have their own shoe.
Yeah. So it's like
shoe table.
Yeah.
Shoe table.
So people,
I got to be right in it, huh?
Yeah, right up there. Yeah, there you go. So people will buy super expensive shoes and then set them in the table, and it just makes the value of the table go up.
But can you ever pull the shoes out, or they're destroyed?
They're actually cut in half.
Oh, so they're already destroyed. Got it.
Yeah, but I wore them for 5 years straight.
Right,
so I just couldn't throw them away. There's the first pair of shoes that I just could not throw away or donate. And I was like, I got to keep these somehow.
So you don't have me, a bag of T-shirts from college that I can't part with?
I have some.
Yeah, I can't part. I have a whole bag. I can't.
Once every 2 years, I'll take a ton of stuff to Goodwill. Yeah, and I'll just donate it. Yeah.
But I have band shirts. I have original 1990s concert shirts, Green Day at the Palace in Hollywood.
Wow, that's cool.
When I was 14.
Yeah. My first concert was Sum 41, dude.
What?
Yeah, at the
those
Six
guys,
Flags
I love those
Amphitheater.
Guys. I love those guys.
Yeah, I think I was 10. and we were there, and it was like noon on like a weekday.
Yeah.
And I was like full of angst because I was like excited to be a teenager, but I wasn't quite there yet. Yeah, it was rad. It was
Those
cool.
punk rock shows were, oh man, they helped me grow up. That was the best.
Yeah.
That's why I feel for these kids. No concerts, nothing. Like,
I know.
oh my
Yeah,
God.
but concerts are coming back though.
Yeah.
Slowly.
I got three. I'm going to go see Rammstein.
Wow, that'll be
Yeah.
wild.
I bought it before.
In LA?
I bought it before COVID,
And
they canceled it, and they like right immediately canceled it and delayed it, and they're like, "Oh, you can." We're like, "We're gonna keep our tickets." And in September of 2020, we were like ready to go the day before, and we look at it, and it was September 2021.
Wow.
So they had delayed it 2 years.
Damn.
We're like, "Fuck." But anyway, we're gonna go, and then
Dude, concerts are gonna be so
Go
wild.
see
People
Jungle.
are just ready to party.
we'll see if they're gonna be testing or what they're gonna be doing.
Yeah,
I think
testing on site.
No, not on site. They're going to make you show proof of your test at the door.
Oh,
Can you imagine how expensive it would be to
test on site?
Yeah,
some comedy clubs have done that.
I have a testing company. So
You do?
can. I have a testing company
Really?
called Super Safe Set.
Nice.
And it's targeted at production companies. And we also have like the walk-in clinic, the Evolve Testing Center.
Yeah.
But it's, it's a big investment for companies. Productions have to do it, I think, because, you have all these people working close together.
Yeah.
Comedy show, I get it. It's like 100 people, 50 people.
They're not. The only time I've heard that happen is when like Joe Rogan was doing shows in the fall.
Yeah.
And I think it was hotter in Texas. Like the COVID was more on a.
I don't know what people are going to do.
Yeah.
You can't make everyone get a vaccine, that's for sure.
They're trying.
Yeah.
They're trying hard. They're trying hard.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with the
not
vaccine.
Oh God. Oh God.
I mean, there's such a crazy divide with people, and of course it's become political. It's impossible for anything to not be political anymore. Like when we first talked, the masks were becoming political. Remember that was like spring 2020, and we were talking about how crazy that was because it's like, why aren't we talking about vitamins and other things like that? And so now that's become the vaccine, and it's like my buddy asked me just the other day, hey, which vaccine did you get?
Right.
Like it's just assuming. And it's like a socially assumable thing to
like
just
it
think
matters,
that
by the
everybody's got
way.
it. Like it matters, A, privacy, B,
Was it
who
your
gives
business?
a shit?
I think it's a way of asking, like, did you get the vaccine? Because I feel like
Yeah.
they don't want to ask that. So like they're even jumping to the assumption that everyone's going to get the vaccine or wants to get the vaccine.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. And
It's weird.
And now with them not giving certain vaccines or like recalling some or stopping usage of some, it's given people even more hesitation, I think. I got a text from the LA Family Clinic, which is what my health insurance covers, and the text said, for your safety, we will only be giving the Moderna vaccine at all upcoming vaccine appointments. And I saw that and I was like, oh, so that means for your safety, they're not going to give Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson. So what have you seen recently that you've been looking at? Like, what have you been paying attention to most when it comes to these?
When it comes to the vaccines, I think the thing it's like the same thing we talked about. I think it's a false promise that it's going to be the solution. It's going to get us out of COVID. I think it's, people are like, oh, I got vaccinated. Everything's great. I'm like, is it? How great is it? How long is it going to last? Do you not have to wear a mask? Do you have to wear a mask? I think that, people make these assumptions that, oh, it's going to decrease our rate of, transmission. There's some new evidence just recently they came out that suggests that, if you have a high antibody titer, that it probably prevents you from transmitting. But we don't know. I think there's so many questions about it that whenever you hang your hat on one solution. So I look at the vaccine as a tool. We have all these different tools to combat COVID, and masks are one tool. But if it's not like back then, it's not like they were going to solve the problem. Right. Vaccines are a tool. They're not going to solve the problem. The problem is a respiratory virus that's going to come and go. It's going to have, different variants. Is it going to act like the flu where we have to do a booster every year? It doesn't seem to be acting like, some of these other infections, like, when you finish your Hep B series, you're immune to Hep B, right? So I just think there's so many questions. There's so many unknowns that the way people, group all vaccines together, group all the treatments together. It's just not that simple, And I think just like I really tried to emphasize, and that's all I ever talk about is, what can you control? You can control your modifiable risk factors. So you can get skinny.
Yeah.
You can control your blood sugar. You can optimize your vitamin D. You can go outside. You can exercise. There's evidence. There's great research that says just exercise decreases your risk. You can use your common sense and the data and be like, well, if I'm walking down the street and there's no one out there, I'm just by myself, or if someone's just walking by, the chances I'm going to get something is very low. So maybe I should take my mask off and smile at the person, because smiling at someone is also very important for our mental health.
It is. It's dope as serotonin release a little bit. There's a study that just came out that Bill Maher quoted. I don't know where it's from, like Johns Hopkins or something.
He went on a great rant.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And the study showed that 78% of people who are hospitalized are obese. That's a significant number. And I've always been frustrated that stuff like that just isn't shared. It's not shared. The information that's shared seems so selective. And of course, then you start going down different paths of like, why is it like that? But just the fact that we're so focused on making sure everybody knows that they can get it, and everybody knows that they can be hospitalized and you can die, without speaking about the possibilities or likelihoods depending on the demographic you're in.
It's fear-mongering.
Yeah.
It's fear-mongering, and I think it's funny because we have so many people that are dying from diabetes and cardiovascular disease and dementia and all of these like chronic metabolic diseases, and there's not this fear-mongering that's something we should fear-monger. And I think part of that is, we try to normalize obesity. We try to normalize like, oh, you can be fat and healthy, and it's like, you could, but very few people are. There's interesting concept of the personal fat threshold, and that like depending on your genetics and sort of where your bloodline comes from and what your individual genetic profile is, like you can have extra fat on your body and you don't necessarily have to be metabolically damaged. But that's not most people. Most people, when you show a picture of like a heavy person, you can't just say they're healthy. It's very, very, they're healthy. It's very, very unlikely that they're healthy. It's very likely that they're sick. And so I worry that are building this super, everyone accept everyone and you can't poo-poo anything. But in reality, being obese, not thinking about your food intake, not exercising, not worrying about your mental health, these are not acceptable things, like it shouldn't be acceptable. We need to expect more from each other, So I think that, there's probably a fear of like, saying, oh, obesity is this thing that's really scary and it's going to get you in the hospital for COVID. When so many people are obese, you're really going to create like some real panic and fear.
Yeah.
And then you think about like, well, if you do that and people do listen and they get skinny, and you're going to sell a lot less drugs. Yeah. You're going to sell a different pattern of food. So if everyone were to listen to me and start eating meat and eating like organic and really being thoughtful about what plants and, seeing through this plant-based agenda and for what it is, and actually looking at the fake chicken nuggets and being like, oh my God, this is poison. Yeah. And I can just eat some red meat and it's healthy.
And no more soda.
Just the finances. Like I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's just there's so much money in chronic disease.
Oh yeah.
Right? There's so much of it.
It's a $1 trillion industry. Like that's a hidden industry.
Yeah, I don't even know that it's hidden. It's like the elephant in the room. In the sense, you see it, but no one wants to look at it. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna turn my head away. Okay, I get it. The drug companies are making money. Yeah, they're charging through the nose for insulin and all these diabetic drugs, and they're just killing it. And okay, we're just not gonna look there. We're gonna worry about like what we're gonna get a vaccine. It's like, so for me, the vaccine, back to like kind of the question, it's sort of not. It's not that interesting. Like it's a vaccine. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in the winter.
It's still technically in trial, right? Like I've never paid attention to vaccines before this. I think a lot of people didn't. But just the fact that it's still technically in its trial, we have no idea what the long-term benefits or negative effects of it will be, because we haven't had it for a long term.
I get the most frustrated when I just see doctors just get a shot, not questioning. And I'm not here to discourage people from getting a vaccine.
Same.
When people ask me about it, I'm like, it's an individual choice. I can arm you with the information. This is what I know. It's probably very safe, but I'm not sure. And, there's these side effects. That's real. Are you a high risk person? Are you around really high risk people? Maybe it's definitely worth it. It's a no brainer. But maybe for someone like you or me, like, it's not a no brainer. We're healthy. I'm not around those people. But when I do see patients, I'm still going to take all my precautions, wear my N95 and everything. Mm-hmm. But I don't look at it as such a clear, like, oh, vaccines are magic and you got to just do it. I don't like that idea.
That's what it's being pitched as. There's so much like societal pressure in that area of the vaccine. I'm not like surprised by the pressure, but I'm kind of like disappointed by it. Just seeing, like, the other day I was on Facebook, and you know how they have that row of like, hey, you should click on these things of like ads or whatever. And it was celebrities being quoted by different sources saying they just got the vaccine and they're so happy about it. And it was like Britney Spears. And I mean, immediately I was like, just leave that girl alone. She's been through enough. Y'all don't need to be pressuring her to say some shit. And then it was like a bunch of other actors and musicians and like big name pop stars. And it felt like such a gross, like, propaganda thing. And I kind of get that they're trying to help people who might be on the edge, but like, what outweighs that for me is like the disingenuousness of just having it throttled down my throat. And the messaging of like, get the vax. If you haven't gotten the vax, you're a bad person.
It's not education.
Yeah.
It's not like they're spreading education, right?
It's not an infographic. It's not something that makes me more confident in what's in it and what it's doing inside my body. It's literally just messaging and branding, and like, it's creating this weird divide between people. I've had friends on Facebook posting, like, if you straight up, like, post a picture of your selfie with your vax card so that we can make everybody who doesn't have one feel bad.
Right.
That was a legit post from a friend. Mm-hmm. And it makes me feel really bad. And I'm hoping that this summer it passes through like kind of a wave and people kind of start to forget about the shit and we don't end up having passports and all that stuff. But who knows? I mean, look at your face, dude. You're cringing already.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that, there's like this big promotion to push the vaccine, and then there's this like, oh, vaccine hesitancy is so bad. This and that creates vaccine hesitancy. Yeah. It's called thinking for yourself and wanting to know what's going on. Vaccine hesitancy means people are using their brain.
Yeah, it means you're learning.
So God forbid people actually question what you're pumping down their throat. So when I see that vaccine hesitancy nonsense, I think that is like anti-intellectual and anti-free.
It's
freedom.
Offensive.
Yeah, it's
100%.
It's offensive. I'm like, what do you mean? I get to be hesitant. That's what I want. Like, that's called being free. And this idea that, oh, you get a vaccine, you're a hero. I hate that idea. It's,
and the people who think that also think that having hesitancy means you're a right-wing conspiracy theorist. And you immediately get put down just for questioning it. Like, immediately, they'll brand you. They'll be like, you're questioning it? Just get it, you QAnon psycho, And it's like, no, dude, you're allowed to, like, think.
That whole, like, liberal, and it is a liberal, I hate to, it's politicized, like that liberal agenda of, like, this is how you should think, and if you question us or you question this thinking, you're QAnon. You're crazy. You're
conservative psycho.
You hate people. You don't care about your neighbor. Like that is so divisive, and it's so like creates so much animosity between people. And I, in my position, as a doctor that's getting more and more out into the public sphere, it's like you have to play the balance, because I don't want to dissuade people from doing something that might be really good for them. But my whole thing is like, use your brain and think about it, ask questions, and let questions and thoughts be your fuel to like make decisions instead of being told what to do.
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't like wait to be told what to do. You should decide what to do. That's why, So yeah. And another thing that I've noticed in this kind of space is just probably the most alarming is you definitely see a divide. I see a divide in my practice and just my exposure to all these different people. I have my practice in Los Angeles that people come in, like my clinic, my primary care practice, and
which is called
Evolve Healthcare.
There you go.
And you can, if you're interested, we take patients on telemedicine from around the country now, depending on what state you're in, but definitely in California. What I notice is kind of like people are starting to separate. So if you're really young, if you're like, under 25, I'm just coming up with some numbers, like generally like what I'm, seeing, but like people that are young in their 20s, college age people, there's so much pressure to buy into these ideas that there is a huge, like the kids feel this huge pressure that they have to get a vaccine and they have to post these things. And there is like this like aggressive, like you have to embrace this. It reminded me when I was young in college, the whole Obama thing and how it was like, you better embrace Obama or you're not even in college. Like I was at UCLA at the time. And like, you better embrace Obama.
That's
and
funny.
at that time, and it's just an analogy. My point is, like at that time, you were like, oh, he's going to change the world. He's going to be amazing. This is going to be a game changer. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Like it was just another president, in my opinion. I don't know. People could disagree with me, but he made some good things and a lot of mistakes. And I don't think he really helped the racial situation that much because we're in a pretty bad racial situation. So that's where my head was at. And those promises weren't delivered. And I think that's what's happening with the young people. They get pushed this kind of ideology and there's all this pressure. And so I have families that come to me where the adults are questioning things, and they're like, I don't know, like maybe we should wait and see what happens with the vaccine before we jump into it. Like I have a history of really bad allergies. You have an autoimmunity. Maybe we shouldn't be getting the vaccine right now until we know more and know which is the best one for us to get, which is the safest, since it keeps kind of changing and you keep seeing new information.
Yeah.
And the kids, they go back to their friends and they get all this pressure. Like you're a terrible person for not getting a vaccine. Like you're not allowed to question this. You got to go do it. And I think that's really scary and it's really messing up our young generation and a generation that wasn't out in the world, wasn't going to concert, wasn't socializing and having relationships. And now it's their time. And now this world is not the same as it was for us,
Yeah.
and that's really sad. And then on the other side of it is you have older people like greater than 65, 70 that are really, really scared. And that's probably more reasonable for them to be scared because the virus is particularly scary for them. And then you have all the people in the middle, like the 30s, 40s, and 50s who are like, I just want the world I had. Like, we get it. I get it. There's another virus.
Back.
There's another virus. We were really scared. We locked down, but it's not killing that many people, as they said. And it is what it is. It sucks. It's terrible. But we should probably go back to life the way it was, because if we don't, we're going to be in a really, really bad spot. And the America that I knew and the thing that we were all proud of about America is gone, and as an immigrant who came here and like my parents came here with dreams and they accomplished those dreams, and I want to accomplish the next round of dreams. I don't want to lose America. So like part of it, and I think that's kind of like what resonates with your comedy is like bringing up those unpleasant issues, making fun of the liberal side of things and the Republican side of things, making fun of some of this like stuff that's sensitive. That's what America's about. Like you've got to be able to do that. And so to what you're saying about the summer, I just don't think it's going anywhere. I think that the people that are scared, like really scared, the younger people and the older people are going to be really scared. And it's going to take a long time to turn that dial. Yeah.
It's, I'm really concerned about like the mental health aspect of everything and how that's going to affect people, especially kids, dude. I'll go work out on the beach and I'll see kids under 10 years old with a mask on, like, digging holes. No one's around.
It's despicable.
And it's like, it's
bad.
Freaks me out, man, because it is so, like, that specific act is so unnecessary. And I just worry for the future of what that kid is going to grow up to be, whether it's some crazy hypochondriac, some very, very antisocial, in comparison to what that child's personality could be like if they were not raised in such a fear state. Because wearing a mask on the beach as an 8-year-old by yourself, that's a fear state. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're being told, this just helps you breathe clean air. You're looking around, you're unable to talk, you're unable to communicate with your face, you're thinking about germs all the time, and that really worries me. The
mental health fallout is only beginning.
Yeah.
Like, I was really shocked as we were going through all the lockdowns how dismissive we were of all the old people stuck in nursing homes, because I saw so many people die, and I saw so many people that were like holding on, had some cognitive stuff, just go into full dementia. Because when you're stuck in a house and your family can't visit you and everyone's afraid, and all you do is watch this crazy news stuff, you lose your mind. And I literally watched that happen to dozens of people, older people that I personally take care of. It's probably, once we have the data, like 10 years from now, it's going to be horrific what happened to our elderly population. But what I'm seeing now in this like second year is the fallout of the kids, because the kids, you kind of deal with this stuff. Like you deal with it. It's like being in a war, though. It starts catching up to you, right?
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of young people in their like late teens, 20s, and early 30s have full mental breaks. Lose their jobs and have disastrous mental health outcomes, lack of support. There's hard to get jobs, families struggling. You're like in a situation where if you lost your job, you can go back to your family. Like they're afraid to go see their family. Can't even go back. They can't even see them, right? That's changing a little now, but I worry that the damage has been done, and like we're going to see the mental health side effects of this thing, the results of all the masking. Again, I was railing a bit against masks back then, and now I'm like, you don't understand what kind of destructive force these masks are for our mental health and for our like interpersonal health. I think people like, but in China, like everyone wear masks. Yeah, but that's a different kind of society. It's a different kind of people. It's a culture thing
forever.
Well, and like a lot of Asian societies, they're communal. I think that's the word. They think of themselves as part of a group, right? Like that's where their point of pride comes from. And in China, like you want to be part of a group. They try to conform. It's just the way their society is structured. Their government is different as a result, and everything operates differently. So wearing a mask to them is not going to be as destructive as it is for an America that's built on individuality and freedom. And we rely on looking at each other in the eyes, seeing if you're smiling, seeing if they're not smiling, to figure out how to interact. Is this my kind of person? Can I do business with them? And I just think that the real, there's like this really underlying destructive process that's going to happen if we keep buying into the whole of like, oh my God, germs, I got to be afraid of each other. It's going to like really mess up the Western world, because individualistic societies need the interface. They need that, And to go on a little bit of a tangent, that's part of where I think like the virtual world, the decentralized crypto world, these metaverses, I think actually that's a future that starts making a lot more sense to me, because that's a place where and I don't see it changing. So as things keep getting more and more scared of each other and more isolated, at least you could go into this metaverse and interact with people and have a personality.
It's funny that the whole COVID thing not only forced us inside, but then even deeper into this whole new reality. I mean, the metaverse and this idea of a world inside of a man-made computer system has been inevitable to me. Like it's always been part of our future. I think we've ramped up faster moving toward it now. And cool. Like that's like the video game industry is literally the biggest thing. It makes more money than sports and movies combined every year. So there's already people that are in their video games 6 to 10 hours a day. And once that becomes more of a virtual reality, augmented reality thing, I wonder that's what makes me wonder if that will help people whose mental health has been negatively affected by COVID, or if that will make them worse and more introverted and less likely to experience reality in the real world. But then, of course, the existential question becomes, what is your definition of the real world?
Exactly.
Because for so many people, being in an augmented reality universe is the real world. It's where their relationships are. It's where their interactions are. It's where they spend money to get things, whether it's a weapon or a experience or like a thing or a place or whatever. And they come out to like poop and eat. And so like, who am I to say that what your real reality is, you know?
I think that it depends on the future that you see, you know, like I think that being an old timer now, I see this, I hope a future is where people don't have masks on and they're out, you know, going to concerts and seeing.
Florida, baby.
Yeah. But I believe honestly that we will keep going towards, you know, people really staying to themselves more and more, people working from home more and more. And they're just, as a result of that, they're just being a platform where being able to interact with more and more people through this virtual space, it's just going to be, it will be a good thing in that future. And I actually think that's a good thing for the future that I see unfolding before me, which is people are afraid to see each other in person. So if they can get that interaction in a virtual space, and then, you know, on that same, we already live in a virtual space. We were just talking before the podcast. Your career exists in a virtual space, right? Like you reach out to all these people. You're not in a comedy club. You're on your YouTube platform, and everyone, you know, like I interact with you more through a virtual Instagram thing than I do in real life, you know?
Yeah.
Because we live in the same city, and it took me an hour to get here because it's like that's the world we live in. There's a lot of people, and I think, you know, especially as there's more and more people, and it is going to be. There is this fear and danger, especially of like big group events, like a festival, right?
Yeah.
So doing a festival in a digital space makes a lot of sense because a lot more people could participate. And, you know, do I like that? Am I excited about it? You know, no, I really am not, but I see it unfolding. And, you know, I don't want to be a dinosaur that's like, oh, it's terrible. Like this virtual world is bad. No, it's the future we live, and it's the reality we already lived in because social media is already virtual, and you edit everything, and you get to edit this, and you get to make your avatar, you know, you put on like a character, you know, basically, and the character might be more popular than you are in the world, you know? So, I think in the future you're going to have like AI characters, generated characters that are famous influencers, you know, that's already starting, and people are going to love that because, you know, it's like a celebrity, but even more perfect because they can't go and, you know, do something terrible and end up on the news.
It's right here. It's right there for you. Clubhouse is moving that train forward a lot. Yeah. Have you messed around with Clubhouse yet?
I haven't.
It's pretty fun, dude. Yeah. I think you would actually be a great addition to
it's
Clubhouse.
Like talking.
It's a social media app where everybody can talk to each other. So it's kind of like a live podcast hangout space. And there are different rooms, like where people can talk, and you can be invited onto the stage, quote unquote.
Oh, cool.
So those are the only people that can talk. Like I was on a stage with, you know, Jake Paul, Snoop Dogg in the game the other day, but I didn't interrupt because I don't want to. I could have.
But they invited you on.
A friend of mine who was also on the stage invited me on. And I could have been like, hey, Snoop, yo, let me ask you a question, dude.
Right.
But of course, that would have been poor etiquette because they were in the middle of a conversation about like NFTs for the black community or something that I did not want to interrupt. But how cool is that? Like just to have the opportunity. I've been on other stages with like Steve Aoki, you know, the manager for whoever this artist is. And like, it's a really cool way to interact. And do you know Stephen Gundry? Dr.
Yeah,
Gundry?
Dr. Gundry is very, very popular.
Yeah, so my buddy Craig Clements, who's really big on Instagram, I don't know if you know him, he works with Dr. Gundry. He invited Dr. Gundry to have like a live conversation and then had people on for Q&As, and I talked to him about homemade pasta and he shot me down a little bit, but then we came to an agreement on how to eat the proper type of tomato sauce, which is no seeds.
Oh, he's against tomatoes, right?
Yes, but he said it's okay if you remove the skin and the seeds. It becomes more digestible and blend it up. And I was like, great, that's what I do anyways.
But is he against meat? I can't remember.
No, he's for meat.
Pro-meat.
Pro-meat. He's anti-Himalayan sea salt because it doesn't have iodine, which I didn't know. He said your body needs some iodine with your salt, I guess.
Yeah, but you want natural products. I don't want to poo-poo. I don't want to poo-poo his health.
Oh, man, we're going to have a full argument with Stephen Gundry. I missed the part where he was talking about plants, but he was talking about how some plants release a lot of toxins into your body. And it actually becomes inflammatory or like anti-good, whatever the terminology was, which I would love to ask you about because I don't have a full understanding about that yet. Anyways, what was I saying? Clubhouse, bro. We got to get you on Clubhouse. We'll do a room. We'll do a welcome room, and it'll be great.
I love it. I mean, and that's really the virtual space. Just you don't have an avatar in the room yet, right? You're just
it's just your picture.
It's just your picture.
Yeah.
I envision, like these Decentraland and Sand, about those. Like I can imagine where you go into like a theater and you have people speaking and doing performances, and instead of just being on your computer, you could be in your VR glasses, like physically there. There's no Ready Player One is the future.
Oh, 100%.
It's like,
bro, my uncle is a virtual reality. Oh, man, I'm gonna get his job title wrong, but he works at Facebook's AR VR department.
Yeah,
I think for Facebook, or maybe he was also contracted to work on a project that does a brain scan, so that doctors can actually go into the brain, and it chops your brain up into sections so you can like see specific parts of the brain and do more exploratory research on the brain via virtual reality, augmented reality. I believe I'm getting that right, Uncle John. I love you. If I'm getting it wrong, we'll have a discussion. But he turned me on to what's that? Second Life. Yeah. So he told me to get into that, right? Because I called him a couple weeks ago. Have you done it? I signed up for it. I haven't explored a lot yet, but that's like the thing, dude. This NFT space, crypto space is opening up all kinds of doors for that.
I think Sand's going to be a really fun platform because it's Sand.
Oh, Sand.
Sandbox. Sorry, Sandbox. You know about Sandbox? Is basically it's a virtual world that is all for gaming. Cool. And so like Atari has a huge platform, a huge piece of land in it, and they're developing all sorts of gaming interfaces. And there's a lot of companies that are getting involved, and it's basically like this virtual world. It's going to be all about gaming, presumably.
Cool.
Like an adult.
That's pretty dope.
It's like a sandbox to play in.
Yeah.
And then you have like Decentraland, which is more like the Wild Wild West, and you could build whatever crazy thing you want in there.
Wow.
I think it's so fun to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities there. I'm excited for like the entertainment possibilities. Like what can I create, dude? Can I make like a virtual space where somebody can interact with an AI version of some of my characters?
Yeah, they're working on that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've heard that, like an autonomous it's like an autonomous like version of yourself. An autonomous avatar. Yeah. So like you create your avatar, and then it just exists in this space, and you're not even plugged in, and it's just out there doing it,
and
making Brent Pella
interact
jokes
with it and talk to it. Yeah. And it could be like Bryler, like, "What's up, you fucking idiot, dude?"
So
you know what I mean? And
Bryler could exist in Decentraland and make you money because he'll put on shows for people, and you'll just go into Decentraland and be like, getting paid.
Yeah, to think that I could have like a stable of characters that exist only in a crypto space that are so wired with AI that they can interact with whoever the audience is and whoever's experiencing them. And then it's like, bro, do they actually, at what point do they exist? At what point do we get to a space where the AI is so good that they're almost free thinking? Yeah, and that's where I'd start to go down rabbit holes. That's just crazy.
I'm listening to this great Joe Rogan podcast with Brian Greene, and he's like,
that's on my list.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Guys, that's drink one for the first mention of Joe Rogan on today's episode.
Cheers to that.
Yeah.
But so he's talking about that? Yeah, he talks, he's talking about quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and how we have basic, like our standard computer. Yeah. And then they're working on quantum computing, and quantum computing is taking into account the randomness and sort of this probability that all these possibilities are happening. I'm not going to go into that whole physics. It's a super fun podcast. People should listen to it. But it basically gets to the idea that quantum physics explains that there's an infinite number of realities where every outcome of everything that's happening can happen, and that electrons don't exist in one spot, they actually exist in many spots, and whatever. That's a whole thing we can talk about. But the idea being that like our basic computers, they can kind of model stuff based on our inputs, but when you start having quantum computing, it can start modeling things the way the real world works, and then you can create have real AI, because that AI is based on a mathematical model that's actually how our real world, right? Because like the computers we use now, that's using math, but that model is like a computer language. Yeah. Whereas quantum mechanics is the math and the language of reality. Yeah. And so if you have a computer that can start processing what might happen, using those mathematical equations, you can then create, you can create an idea, like it can become creative, is the way he was describing.
Right.
And he was saying how we as humans really define ourselves by our ability to be creative.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start modeling, this modeling that's pattern recognition, but using real world.
And it's like independently creative.
That's the idea. Right now, an AI can independently come up with what to do next, but it's from like these predictions that we're putting into it. Mm-hmm. But it's still using calculations that aren't based on real world. That randomness, that idea that anything's possible, or these are the multitude of possibilities, and it can go here and here and here. That's a crazy thing to calculate, right? Yeah. You're calculating maybe an infinite number of stuff. So our computers can't do that. But a quantum computer in the future, it can do that, and then it can create a true AI. And then, is it different than us? Isn't that what our brain is like? What is our brain doing?
Is it a sovereign? Does it become a sovereign entity?
Can it accrue money and like become powerful and wealthy?
I mean, AI. I just feel like AI is like learning about us all the time, just from the internet. And one day we're gonna get to this point where it's gonna have all the information about humans necessary to take us over, whatever, like create its own thing. I don't know.
Are we already in a simulation? Ha ha ha.
There we go. That is the question. Bro, let me ask you about vegetables, bro.
Okay.
I got to ask you about vegetables, dude. Because I've been hearing all these things about vegetables, bro.
What are you hearing?
I'm hearing these things about vegetables that some plants are maybe not doing what people think they're doing, or are doing some things that are bad, that if more people knew these things were happening inside their body, they wouldn't be eating those specific types of plants. Now, I'm a pretty meat and greens kind of guy. So I eat a lot of plants. I eat a lot of bell pepper. I have this protein greens mixture in there that's like baby spinach and pea shoots and I don't know what else is in there, some other stuff. Tons of tomatoes, probably too much tomatoes, but I try to have it proper with no skin and no seeds.
Do you buy fresh tomatoes?
I do. I buy heirloom tomatoes, and I'll boil those to take the skin off, and then I'll squeeze them and blend them.
You could just get like really high quality organic tomatoes.
I do that too. I do that.
That's
I get
probably
San Marzano tomatoes.
Yes, that's the one, because those are like naturally ripened. A lot of the tomatoes that you're buying in a store are chemically ripened, and so like that there's questionable of like how good that is for you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into like which tomato or which plant is good or bad, because I think that's like a more nutrition conversation. But like on a bigger picture, it's this idea that plants or fruits and vegetables are healthy for you, that they're full of nutrients. And I think that is something that's being called to question, basically. I think for one, if all of our plants were coming from our backyard, if our soil was a really high quality soil full of all the natural nutrients, full of sulfur, which you really need sulfur in your soil to feed the plants and make them really nutritious, and we really have depleted that among a variety of other like nutrients. I think at just a baseline, most of the plants that we're consuming are just not as nutritious as they were or as they could be, right? So I think if you've got your own garden, or your friend's got a garden, if you're going to like a local supplier who's really farming appropriately, because there's different farming practices, right? Like you've got monocropping, which is bad for the planet, bad for the plants, bad for everyone, but they produce a lot of cucumbers that look just perfect,
right?
And they're just perfect, and the color's just right, and the shape's just right, and that's what people are obsessed with in the supermarket, and that's just not reality. Like a funny shaped cucumber that goes in your backyard is a good cucumber. It's very good. It's a really good cucumber. So I think like just this idea that plants are good for you should be called to question. Now, I still think that having some plant food in your diet is very important. I think eating a lot of raw vegetables can cause a lot of problems. The obvious issue would be the pesticides that are used to keep them fresh, to get them to your plate looking the way they do. Again, their inherent nutrient quality from the soils that they were grown in and from what's put in those soils. I also worry about like this idea that, we didn't evolve next to a patch of cauliflower that's just there all year. We would come across some plants and we'd eat them, and then we wouldn't eat them maybe for another year or two because you just wouldn't come across them. So that hunter-gatherer pattern lends very well to like seasonal eating and rotational eating, and really a variety of plants. So I think like there's different strategies one can think about when consuming plants to like do it in a very healthy way. But I think when you're buying the same bag of greens from the same supplier, you're setting yourself up to be overwhelmed with whatever potential toxin is there, and also whatever part of that plant is trying to not be eaten. So there's this idea that a plant doesn't really want to be eaten by you. It definitely doesn't want to be digested, right? Because a lot of the plants, especially fruits, they're trying to get into your body, and then that seed doesn't want to be digested because it wants to poop out and grow another plant.
Yeah, I've heard this with a couple different types of
nuts.
Greens specifically,
Yeah.
that a lot of greens are actually really hard to digest. I don't know, it's the specific kind.
Just greens in general, our guts are not built to digest a ton of plant food. It's why so many people are bloated all the time. This idea that you need tons and tons of fiber was an observational study, like observational concept from a very long time ago. It was adopted because it just sounds good, and it really doesn't hold water. Like having a ton of fiber doesn't prevent colon cancer. It doesn't do a lot. When the only evidence that exists to suggest it might be good for you is epidemiological evidence, which isn't good research. It's just not. It's a questionnaire. So we talked about that on the previous podcast. Like epidemiological evidence should be a question and further questions, and should never really be considered like something to follow. So yeah, I think plants when they're cooked, you release the nutrients, so they become more digestible. So I always bring up this like example of spinach. Yes, it has iron. If you eat a bag of spinach, you will be horribly bloated, and you will not absorb much of the iron because you cannot digest it, and you will end up pooping out a lot of that spinach. If you boil a pound of spinach down to this mushy goo, then you can extract a lot more of that iron.
Really?
Yeah.
It doesn't cook out when you boil it?
No. Like if you overboil it into nothing, but I'm saying like, when you cook plants, it makes them more digestible, and it makes their nutrients more available. This is true with fermentation as well. So we're not great at processing plant food. So we evolved, because we have these big, beautiful brains, to process using nature. So when we talk about processed food, we mean industrial processing. We mean high pressure, high potentially addition of chemicals, high pressure, high heat to like modify things. But when we're cooking them or we're fermenting them, those are actual natural processes. We evolved with fire, we evolved with fermentation, and that's how you unlock nutrients. So fermented plants, I encourage people to eat regularly. And fermented plants is something that should be part of your daily diet. And it's not part of an American diet, but it's part of many other diets. Like you can think Korean. I'm Russian.
Kimchi?
Kimchi is like a very, very good for your gut. It helps deliver healthy microbiome, healthy bacteria that help your gut microbiome. So I think that it's not about plants are bad and meat is good. It's about understanding our food history and understanding like our evolution, understanding our guts, our gut microbiome, understanding that what has been sold to you for the last 100 years is not healthy. That's why we are more metabolically damaged and we have more chronic medical disease. I'm not saying anything controversial here, even though
facts.
Even though it's like
factual.
But it is controversial. People will say, "Oh my God, no, the spinach is so good for me." Like, no, it's not. Like it's okay in moderation. and that's what we used to talk about with meat. And I'm like, you're made of meat. When you could consume a piece of red meat, it has everything you need for the most part. Not everything, but it's a very, very complete meal. And it feeds you the kinds of proteins, the absorbable proteins, the kinds of fats, the quality of the fat, to really make you thrive. And I think that's the concept I try to like educate everyone on, is that it's not about taking a position of I'm a carnivore or I'm a vegan or this or that. It's about understanding food, because it's so like, it's part of how you feel every day. It's part of your culture. It's so ingrained in us, and getting all emotional about it and being like, oh, this is what I eat because I'm Italian, or this is what I eat. Like, no, you learn. We're moving forward. We're evolving. We're going to be in a virtual world soon. Let's like use the information we have to make more thoughtful understanding. So I think that, there's a lot to be said about specific plants that you should be cautious about. Nightshade vegetables are an issue for some people, but really like just eating a bunch of potatoes is a real issue for some people because it's not good for you. Like if in a time where there wasn't any food and you couldn't find animals, like, you can survive on potatoes. But in this world, like we need to think about thriving. We need to think about how we evolved. And we evolved eating animal foods, thriving on animal foods. And as soon as we introduced grains and agriculture, we got sicker. Yeah. And that is just a history lesson that needs to be embraced by everyone and start thinking about that. So instead of, trying to get a fake chicken nugget, maybe make your own chicken nugget with a pasture-raised chicken. Yeah, it costs more money because it costs more money to raise a pasture-raised chicken, and it takes more time to make the chicken nugget. You got to make it because they're not making healthy pasture-raised chicken nuggets. Right. They're making weird chemical slop chicken nuggets.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a chicken nugget be made?
No. From so McDonald's.
Gross,
I've seen the slime that pours out.
It's like a pink paste.
Yeah.
It's like the nastiest mixture of like ground up innards and nasty stuff. Oh man.
And then they bread it. And then they fry it in vegetable oil.
It's like not even bread. It's like all this other stuff that they put on it to make it last. There's a video going around right now of this woman who found a bag of McDonald's that was in her house for 27 years.
It was fresh.
And the fries look fresh.
Yeah,
the fries look legit. They look like you could eat them now.
Because bacteria aren't trying to eat that nasty stuff.
Yeah, dude. Even the grossest little bacteria doesn't want that.
I have a dog. I love my dog. Follow him at Disco Doodle because he's the cutest little thing. I love him. But anyway, we've been raising him throughout the year, and he's not driven by food. He is driven by love. So he is picky with food, which is weird and funny because he's this huge doofy dog. Yeah. But he will not touch processed food. Like
he knows?
Like we've always fed him good food because I'm obsessed with the sapien diet and lifestyle, and my dog is no different than me. It should eat a species appropriate diet. Right. So I'm not going to feed him a bunch of bullshit. I'm going to feed him meat and mostly protein. And
do you feed him raw meat? That you buy from the store?
He's too picky. No, he won't eat the raw meat. He had some raw. I ground up some steak, so like I wouldn't feed him raw ground beef from the store because you have to cook it right because once it's ground, you can introduce bacteria. Okay. But if you buy a steak, right, and you either make sure it's really high quality steak or just clean the outside, right, then you can grind it up and then you can eat that. So that's steak tartare, right? Because the inside of the steak is clean. I've had
raw steak before.
I love steak tartare.
It's pretty it felt like dangerous.
Oh no, it's
just
so good.
Just because like you're always like, ooh, E. coli is everywhere.
Yeah, with a raw quail egg on top. Ooh.
What?
Yeah, and that's the French.
A raw quail egg?
Now they pickle the quail egg, but yeah, you could put a raw egg on top. That's
whoa.
I used to have that. I think it was called just a French restaurant in the valley.
Is that Ukrainian?
That's French.
That's French.
It's French.
What do you dip in?
You take like a little it's like raw ground beef, some vinegar and stuff to give it spices, vinegar just over the top, and then like an egg, and then little crackers, and you have it like a little appetizer.
And the egg, you dip straight into the egg.
Oh, you mix it up. Yeah, you get the make it all.
Wow.
I mean, people think I grew up eating stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn, that's so crazy.
So I don't recommend it. Don't go eating raw eggs and get mad at me. But if you go to a nice French restaurant and they have steak tartare, oh my God.
What? So did you grind up the steak for your dog?
Ground up the steak for my dog. He loved it. But my big point about it is the dog can tell crappy processed food from like real food. So if I get even like nasty, like if I try to give him like nasty dry chicken, it's been sitting in the fridge, he won't touch it. If I try to give him some processed food that like we're not eating, he won't touch it, but like only high quality food. And I guess my point about that is like, we know as animals, like we know, like, if it's good for you, even if it's not good for you, you can feel it. And I do think people start ignoring, they're like walk around bloated and farting all the time and pooping 14 times a day. And it's just like,
wait, you're not supposed to poop?
You're not supposed to do that. Like you don't need to do that. And you don't need to eat 10 times a day. I'm being like, I'm being, dramatic about it, but it's just these ideas about food culture are so wrong, and people are so brainwashed. And I'm starting to use more of this language because it's like, you got to wake up, like if you're feeling like shit and you're sick, you can't just keep like, oh, I'm not eating enough plants. No, you're not. Just stop and eat, like fast. Right. Talked about fasting a lot last time. Fasting is still the most powerful intervention I've ever learned. Yep. as a physician, honestly.
It's actually been one of the biggest parts of my health journey over the past like 3 years.
Yeah.
Just straight up, not especially over the past like couple months where I've really dialed in. So I go through these phases. A couple months I'll do it hardcore. I'll have a couple weeks where I just eat right away. But now I'm back in my zone of
What's your fasting schedule?
I typically will only eat starting at noon, between noon and 1, and then I'll have my last bite around 9.
Yep.
And then I'm sleeping around midnight, 12:30, and then I'm up at 8. I need my 8 hours. I need 8 hours.
Yeah, me too. I need 9 hours sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't mess around.
Sleep is legit, dude. Sleep, I'm not one of those 4-hour people. I tried to be, and it just does not work.
That's another thing. We grew up in a time as kids where it was like venerated to like not need a lot of sleep, and those people end up with brain disease.
Right.
It's like all these things that we grew up being told is healthy for us. I am realizing, and I'm a young doctor. I've been in private practice now for 5 years, and every year I just have to keep changing what I recommend and changing how I live my life, because I'm like, holy shit, half of the stuff they taught me was really, really, it wasn't just like, it was wrong. It was just flat out, it was like wrong. Bad. It's bad. I have patients come into me, they got diagnosed with diabetes, and their providers are like, oh, you should just eat whole grains. Whole wheat. Grains. Yeah. Whole grains, like a whole wheat. So they come to me, their A1C's up because they're eating whole wheat, pasta every day. And I'm like, come on, people. Just cut the carbs. You embrace concept. It's like low carb is not a fad. It is common sense. Yeah. It is evidence-based. It is ancestral medicine. It is simple. It is simple. Yeah. But you got to de-brainwash yourself. You got to be like, holy shit, I was wrong about this. Holy shit, I really need fat and animal food. And there's ways to do it in the right way. And it's not just about thinking about the sad piggy on the video that you saw. Like, it's just that life is more complicated than that. Yeah. Yeah. I love that, dude. It's so true. Meat. I eat a lot of meat. I think I eat meat every day. Good. And I felt bad about that. You're a healthy young man. Like 2 years ago. Yeah. But then I did like vegan for 2 weeks, and I just felt awful, and I lost tons of weight, and I was like, I can't. I wasn't working out properly, and I ate eggs, tons of eggs. Yeah. Tons of eggs. What percentage of your diet is meat right now? I say like an animal-based diet, like an animal-based diet. Animal-based, animal-based is a better way to think about it. Okay. And high-quality dairy. I think a lot more people can tolerate dairy than they think they can. And by the way, we're talking about general, right? So one thing that I always talk about is there's general concepts. I wanted to come and talk to you because you have a really broad audience. This isn't a low-carb audience or whatever. I'm just trying to reach anyone who's willing to listen about general food concepts that you should think about and change, right? Yeah. But it's different if you're diabetic. It's different if you have heart disease. It's different if you're elderly. So going through each one of those, don't extrapolate everything I'm saying, because even though a lot of what I'll say is actually an elderly person should eat way more protein than even you and me, and that's weird and shocking because all they eat is fiber and they're just all constipated on 4 constipation meds, and so every old person is constipated. No, it's because you're pumping them full of fiber and they need protein. So there's a lot of nuance. There's so much nuance, and I try to really, there's other doctors talking about the details, this plant is bad and that plant is bad. And my real approach is, let's talk about concepts that everyone can adopt and then make a thoughtful decision about what their diet should look like. Yeah. And connect with a doctor like me or a health coach or a nutritionist that understands what I'm talking about and create that diet. Go on your own health journey. This is the message. It's don't join the carnivore tribe. Don't join the sapien tribe. Those are great tribes for you or him, but maybe not a great tribe for someone else. Right. The idea is just open your mind to food as this really important thing that you should learn about, so that you can make. So you get it. So back to what was I saying about meat? I think 70-80% of your calories should be coming from healthy animal-based sources. It could be different for some people, but that's where I land. I'm really thoughtful about the plant food that I put in. I'm really, for For me, low sugar fruits. So a fruit is anything that has a seed in it.
Yeah.
So when you think about a tomato or a cucumber or a bell pepper, those are actually fruit. They're not a vegetable. So that's an interesting thing to think about. So I really emphasize low sugar fruits as a really healthy option of plant food. And that, again, there's caveats like with tomatoes, but just thinking about it, like olives, avocados, coconuts, bell peppers, cucumbers,
all fruits,
and those tend to be pretty darn good for you especially if you're able to get some organic ones. And you might have to cook them and do other things, and that's what you discover as you go through your journey. But understanding that low sugar fruits, and then going down that path, you start thinking, well, what is a healthy oil? Because I will tell you, probably one of the worst things you could put in your body is vegetable oil. These canola oils, sunflower oil, a rapeseed oil, which is canola oil is rapeseed oil, and corn oil by itself. Ooh. So these are really bad fats, like really, really, really bad, and I think are probably a root cause for many of the metabolic issues and also like gut issues that people are dealing with these days, because this omega-6 high oil is just really, really bad for you. So what's a healthy oil? Fruit oil.
Olive oil.
But it's simple. Coconut.
So much
olive,
oil,
coconut, and avocado.
Yeah.
And again, you can't go. I think that it's about moderation. And me personally, I definitely emphasize animal fats. I use ghee, grass-fed ghee, grass-fed butter. I use beef tallow and lard
to cook. When you're
almost
cooking
exclusively.
Oh, wow.
Almost exclusively. If I'm dressing a salad, I like olive oil because it's got a nice flavor to it. It's just nice.
Tallow in your
I'm not going to put beef tallow in my salad. Or ghee. Animal fats are solid at room temperature. So that's where, like with cooking. But ghee, man, grass-fed ghee will make all your food taste better. It's so high in omega-3s.
I've never cooked with ghee.
It's amazing. Clarified butter.
With tallow.
It's just clarified butter. It's just butter that's boiled so that the proteins are gone. You can make your own ghee.
Stuff. Yeah.
It's the best. It smells like bacon. It's incredible.
Ooh.
You can flavor, so what I'll often do is melt it down and then take my Brussels sprouts, because I do love myself some Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
And I roll them around in the ghee, and then they crisp up and they taste like meaty almost.
That's good.
So
you want to know what I do, bro? Which is the next step, because I like to cook. I'll do homemade bone broth, which I try to do once a week or at least twice a month. And I'll make a lot. And it's tons of mushrooms in there. I love mushrooms. Mushrooms are
we can talk about mushrooms.
Amazing. We'll get into mushrooms.
Because they're their own kind of.
Oh, they're their own thing.
They're not even a plant.
They're legit like an animal.
They're its own
mushrooms
animal.
are their own unique being.
It's got their own.
So we'll have the mushroom conversation in a minute. But I'll do tons of mushrooms. Celery and carrot just for the flavor, and onion for the flavor. Shit ton of garlic, way too much garlic.
Throw some ginger in there. It's really good.
I could do that next. Yep, I'd do that next. A lot of bone marrow, and then maybe a chicken piece or something with some tendons and cartilage or whatever. And I'll make it. It's a 10-hour simmer. So I go. It's pretty legit, and I'm scooping the shit off the top, and I'm doing all the things. And then at the end, I have some, but it's frozen, so you can't have any. I'll make. Some
I got enough bone broth in my house. Thank you.
But what I love to do, my favorite thing to do with the broth is not only to use the liquid in the sauce or just to drink it, but the fat cap that forms when you put it in the fridge. I'll scoop that bitch out, and I'll cook in that, and I'll cook. Whatever I'm making.
That's tallow.
That's tallow, exactly. And so I'll cook vegetables in that, maybe with some butter to make it more of a sauce, or with some olive oil.
I collect.
It's unbelievable.
I collect all these fats. You make that soup. You get that beef tallow. I often.
Yeah, you keep the fat. You just keep it. If you're cooking bacon, you drain the fat after. You keep the fat in a little dish and cover it.
The trick is to put the bacon on a rack, in a dish, and then the fat melts down.
You put it in the oven.
You eat the bacon. You put it in the oven. Yeah. That's actually a better way to cook it anyway. It comes out more even.
Yep.
And then you pour off, and then you just got beautiful lard. Yep. And lard's good for you. Good pork, especially if it's a high quality bacon. We used to, in America 100 years ago, cook with beef tallow and lard. That's what we cooked with.
Yeah.
McDonald's used to cook all their stuff in beef tallow.
Yeah.
They switched because there was the vilification of animal foods and animal fats especially. And that has very, very, very little to do with science, and a lot to do with social pressures and corporate pressures and financial incentives. And it's really sad because we were on a good path. We were healthy people, and we can be healthier now.
Yeah.
But
you want to talk about mushrooms, bro?
I love mushrooms.
Bro, you want to talk about mushrooms, dude?
What you got?
Dude, did you watch do you know who Paul Stamets is?
Of course.
Did you watch Fantastic Fungi?
I watched Fantastic Fungi.
Great, I've seen it twice.
I've read books and articles. I'm a really big, I think mushrooms are so important. They're so important for our planet.
Yeah.
Right? They're such an intricate part of our whole ecosystem. They're powerful. They're awesome food. So I love to cook with mushrooms. They're an awesome medicine, both as a psychedelic experience, but also there's adaptogenic mushrooms. I brought you our new Sapien product.
Yeah, I'm excited.
We came up with a nootropic. So there's mushrooms that are thought to really enhance your cognition, like lion's mane and reishi.
Yeah.
Mushrooms have been part of Ayurvedic medicine and ancient Chinese medicine, and just like real powerful herbs. And all of these things have always been part of humanity. And mushrooms are so great. They're so delicious. My wife, actually, she's like, they taste like flesh. Like she feels like they're fleshy, you know?
Yeah,
and I'm like, that's why I love it. I love it.
They have like a fleshy texture.
It's so good.
I love shiitake. I have a bunch of porcini in the cabinet. But the specific health benefits of some of these mushrooms is like really wild. And I'm speaking from experience, not just reiterating facts that I've heard or read. I took Shroom Tech from Onnit.
Yeah,
they have
love
a great
it.
supplement called Shroom Tech. The coffee I drink has mushrooms, and it's lower caffeine, actually. 4-Sigmatic has the 1 cup of 4-Sigmatic coffee has half the caffeine of a typical cup of coffee, but they have cordyceps and other things in it.
I think it's lion's mane and cordyceps. I think those are the two. Yeah.
And then 4-Sigmatic just has a straight up mushroom elixir, and that's like it has no caffeine, and that will wake me up and have me like good for a day. And it's like a buzziness that has no drop off.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have like the jitters of caffeine or like the real buzz of caffeine. It's like a mellow. It's not a psychedelic buzz, but it's like a cognitive buzz that I get. It's like a little cognitive boost that I feel when I have it. It's unbelievable.
It's so weird because I started taking nootropics, which are mostly mushroom supplements, maybe 4 years ago when Onnit came out with Alpha Brain.
Cool.
And that I heard on Joe Rogan podcast.
Guys, that's string 2 for the second mention of Joe Rogan on today's podcast. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I was so shocked because I took it and I'm like, this is some bullshit. Like, I was just learning about all this stuff, and at no point in my medical training did anyone mention that mushrooms are cognitive enhancing or healthy for you. It was just like mushrooms. I don't know. Like, it wasn't even part of anything. And I took it. I was like, holy cow, this is powerful. And, it gives me an edge, and you're not cracked out, and it's not addictive, and it's natural, and it's so good. That's what inspired us to make Brain Fuel. It's just like it's like all this stuff that I heard about from my mom that her grandma would do for her in Mother Russia. Yeah. Like all these like things that my parents did for health.
These like holistic type things like.
I talk about, acute stressors. I'd love to get into this idea of chronic versus acute stress. Did we talk about that? That's not okay. Think so. Yeah. We'll talk about that. But basically, all of these traditional ways of being healthy, going in a sauna and spending a lot of time in a sauna, then jumping into a cold plunge, then going back into a sauna, fasting, eating these different foods like fermented foods and liver and little sardines.
I had sardines last night.
And like the training, the Russian training with the kettlebells, this high intensity training that's not like what I grew up with, like the Arnold Schwarzenegger stuff. All these little things from my childhood that my dad would talk about, and my mom that I was like, they don't know anything. That was in Russia 100 years ago. Shut up.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I find myself recommending to people and adopting in my own life, and immediately getting healthier, immediately feeling better. Like no question. Like, you need 60,000 people to prove that a statin will decrease a cardiovascular event. After you treat 60 people, one person will have a decrease, and that's the drug that I'm supposed to prescribe to everyone.
Yeah.
But the obvious, overwhelming benefit of taking an adaptogenic mushroom in the morning There's no research for that. No one wants to talk about that. And it continues to give me a sour taste about Western medicine, because it's such a Western medicine. I'm not poo-pooing it. It has so much power. We've done so much with infectious disease, hygiene, emergency care, intensive care, but we have like went backwards 100 years when it comes to like keeping a person healthy.
Yeah.
Like we're just, all we do is make people sick or keep people sick, right? They get sick and then we like keep them sick.
Yeah.
And then we just do research on how to maintain that baseline basically. And so yeah, I don't know. I'm a little all over the place.
It's okay, dude. That's what mushrooms do, baby. That's what mushrooms do.
I want to tell you this concept, and this is the concept I think that's most exciting that I've been kind of developing. So it's this idea of acute stress versus chronic stress, how to leverage stress to be healthy, and how to, like, again, be thoughtful and understanding about stress and stressors and how they affect you so that you could better navigate a modern world. Let me explain.
Okay.
So chronic stress is what makes us sick. Okay. Chronic stress is worrying about bills, anxiety. It's just the chronic stress. It's sitting in traffic. It's being stressed out that you have to go to work and do something you don't want to do. Stress can also come from things like family pressures, issues with family members, legal. I mean, chronic stress is just the world we live in. I even consider chronic stress as like the phone blasting you with information, right? Information's good, but when it's this overwhelming flow of, like, especially conflicting information and advertising, it's stressful. It causes stress for your brain.
Yeah.
And so that is what beats us down. Eating food all the time, especially bad food, processed food, it creates stress in your body. Your body constantly has to digest. It can't clear itself out. It can't heal itself. Has no time to actually rest and recover. It's just constantly being fed. Some even exercise strategies, when people are like not healthy, right? And like, I'm gonna go run a marathon, and then they just start putting miles on their body, like, and they think that's healthy. No, it's not. It's not healthy to just pummel yourself. That's chronic stress. That's how people hurt themselves. Knee issues, back issues, So chronic stress is what the world delivers to us, right? And we need to figure out how to manage it. And what we're taught is to rest, is to take a vacation. And what happens? We've all been on a vacation. You go on a vacation for a week or whatever, and you come back and it takes less than 24 hours to get stressed out. It takes one terrible email from someone and you're right back to like being in it and like freaking out.
Sure.
Because you have no resilience and you have no coping mechanisms for this stress. And rest, you need it. You need to recover, but it doesn't make you more capable of managing chronic stress. It's just rest. It's just that. So I talk about, when it comes to like lifestyle medicine and things you can do as opposed to pills and like interventions, I talk about acute stresses and leveraging acute stress, stacking acute stresses to build resilience. There's this saying that, like, with no pain, no gain, right? So it takes acute stress to get stronger, to become more resilient.
Acute stress physically.
So let me explain.
Mentally, yeah.
Acute stressors, I've kind of packaged 5 that I think anyone can use starting today. They can hear this talk or they come to me in clinic and they can start adding these immediately. So we'll start with food, intermittent fasting. Yeah. Intermittent fasting is a stressor. It causes you can't eat. Your body, has to tap into its glucose sources in its liver. It then starts burning fat to make energy. Now, I'm using the word stress liberally because ultimately your body wants to do these things. It wants to go into ketosis. It wants to empty the liver out. During fasting, you do all these amazing things like repair your mitochondria and heal up your gut. The membrane between you and the rest of the world like starts cleaning up those mitochondria and those cells so it can do a better job. Clear out your gut and you poop everything out and you sort of reset yourself. So fasting is great. We talked about that before, but I think about it as sort of this acute stress because the longer you fast, the more challenging it is. It's not easy. You get better at it. Like you and me, we do that 16-8 method. I don't even call what you do fasting, what I do fasting, that eating at 12-1, last meal around 9. That's like normal eating, but relative to the rest of the world and the way we grew up, that is fasting. But, there is a benefit to do some, and I really encourage people to think about it, is OMAD, 1 meal a day, doing that every once in a while. It pushes your fast a little further. You get deeper into this process of autophagy where you're cleaning out your mitochondria and you're sort of healing yourself. So
rebuilding yourself.
So, and then there's other evidence and a lot of people in the anti-aging space where they're doing 2, 3, 4 day fasts, and that pushes your body even further to heal and recover. But those are stressors, and you have to do them thoughtfully. You have to make sure you're hydrating and make sure you're taking in the right amount of minerals, magnesium, sodium chloride, potassium. There's all this stuff you have to do. So that's an acute stress from a nutritional standpoint. Then you have a physical stress is like high intensity interval training. And this idea that, you can go for a marathon and it'll break you down, or you could just do sprints for 20 minutes and get all the cardiovascular benefit, more muscular benefit, even more powerful hormonal changes from just sprinting. Like a lot of doctors in the physical medicine space are really encouraging people that want to lose visceral fat and want to get really fit. Drop the long distance running where you're at moderate pace, 40, 50% exertion. Go and do sprints, do sets where you're exerting yourself 80, 90%. Do a set of 4, 8, 10, whatever you can tolerate. You're going to get all this benefit with not so much wear and tear. But that's an acute stress. Lifting, we always talk about lifting to exertion, like lifting to failure. That's an acute stress. And then you get stronger. But doing a million sets, you don't get a lot more benefit because it's not leveraging the stress. So you're leveraging the acute stress. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Leveraging fasting, leveraging acute stress. And then I get into these 3 other ones that I think people don't think about is cold immersion therapy. So cold therapy. Ice bath, taking a cold shower.
I take a cold shower when I wake up.
I love it.
All right.
I love it.
Dr. Gary
But
approved.
please, it's so good for you. It releases proteins that are really healthy for you. It wakes up your nervous system. It increases your production and activity of brown fat, which increases your metabolism. Brown fat versus white fat.
What is brown fat?
Brown fat.
So you've given me a score. So these acute.
Are we
stressors.
Back in it right now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Acute
stressors.
Let me say
Almost finished.
So because I want to learn. So this is intermittent fasting is one. The other one was working out,
high intensity interval training,
the HIIT training.
Yeah.
As opposed to long, and also would just incorporating some HIIT training mixed with long interval training, as long as your recovery process is right. Because for me, probably the biggest part of my workout is the recovery, is what I do immediately after and in the day after or during an off day. What am I putting into my body? How am I treating my body is just as important, if not more important, than the sprint drills that I do on the sand, right? Or how hard I go playing basketball or how far I run if it's a distance day. What I do after is very important. So there's those two. And then what was the third?
Okay, so then I got into cold therapy.
Cold therapy, yes.
Heat therapy, which has been used by humans for thousands and thousands of years, like being in a sauna and pushing yourself to where you're really, really hot and uncomfortable and staying there a little bit longer. It releases these heat shock proteins. It's really good for your nervous system and brain. It's very similar to cold immersion therapy, but just challenging your body's ability to deal with that stress. And then a fun one to think about is deep breathing. So if you really have ever done a Wim Hof or any of these other deep breathing strategies, it's really quite challenging. It's even just breathing and thinking about your breathing and doing a relaxation meditative breathing. Yeah. If you're really taking those breaths and you're really focused, it's really quite challenging. And as a result, all of these things cause your body to release hormones that help you grow and get stronger and more resilient. On a psychological and spiritual level, if you can mentally be strong enough to convince yourself to jump in a cold bath and sit there and deal with the discomfort, then dealing with the bullshit that's coming at you from your emails or your phone just becomes easier. Yeah. So a lot of this stuff has evidence-based research to suggest why it's really good for you, for your health, right? And I mentioned some of that, like with the heat shock proteins, whatever. I've mentioned it. My point is that I want people to conceptualize it as, what are we really doing? We are mimicking our ancestral past. We are mimicking the life that we human beings have lived for hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years. And we have to do this. We have to consciously do this because the world we live in is so opposite from the world that our bodies and our minds want. So we're not going to get rid of social media. We're not going to get rid of this overwhelming input of information, but we can build our spirit, our minds, and our brains to be more resilient to it and have coping mechanisms. Like when you have a really shitty day because someone something, again, a nasty email or something bad happened to you, like someone shit talked or you got censored by YouTube or whatever. Right, that's pretty devastating for a guy who's building his platform. Like, that's this chronic stress of like having to do this job and stuff. But if you're out there doing the sprints and then you go and jump in a sauna and you can really like challenge yourself, your mind will be thinking about your body and like being in that moment, and it puts you in that moment, and that's healing.
Yeah.
And it gives you that escape mentally and spiritually, and it boosts your body's ability to deal with a challenge. It makes you stronger, helps balance your hormones. So, and it's all of the things together when you start mixing them. And it's not is doing any one of those things obsessively, right? It's not like I'm going to go do sprints every day and not rest and not let my body heal up. Or I'm going to jump into cold bath every day until I could sit there forever. Yeah. That's not really the point. The point is like we live these dynamic lives in the outdoors where we had to run and hunt and we had to, meditate out while we're doing some like menial task to like build something. There's all these things that we just don't do anymore. And so how do I convince or how do I teach people how to incorporate these ancestral principles into their lives? And I've thought of this kind of explanation of like, you live in a world of chronic stress and you're going to leverage and bring in these acute stressors. Mm-hmm. You're not going to work out. You're not going to fast. You're going to bring in these stressors. And when you're really wanting to like feel stronger and better, that's a day where you might only eat one meal and you're like, that's going to make me feel better. Yep. Because you know that acute stress is going to make you feel you're feeling bloated. You're feeling heavy. You had a heavy week of like eating shit. You're going to start doing your fasts. You're going to jump in the cold shower in the morning. You're going to go and, I'm not going to be worried about, I got to spend a whole hour in the gym doing all this bullshit I want. Nope. I'm going to spend 20 minutes and I'm going to do 10 sprints for 30 seconds. Until I like can't sprint anymore. And then I'm going to rest because I'm busy and I have a million things to do and I can't work out every day. But I know that 20 minutes I spent, I got maximal benefit from it because I leveraged that acute stress by mimicking what my ancestors experienced. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you this. Now, a lot of what I really love about your approach to like medicine and your philosophies behind it are so rooted in history and like the human experience of history rather than being rooted in like new technologies or new ways of looking at things in the present based on our system of medicine now and Western ingenuity that leads to discoveries. And it's much more, your philosophies tend to be more rooted in past experiences and how those can be leveraged for the way humans live today. What was how do you think that way? That's not taught. That doesn't seem like something that's taught at med school. So were these practices that you were just interested in historically? Like you just had an interest in history, or what were some of the like early influences to get you to start thinking in that historical context?
Yeah, I mean, I just always challenged what I was being taught. Like, I came into medical school from a background in neuroscience. I was doing neuroscience research at UCLA. We did some really fantastic work looking at how neurons behave to learn about spaces in the world. And I did really, really exciting stuff. I got published. I almost went towards a PhD. So I came into medicine as a scientist. Like I really felt that way. I was like, I'm here to like question and learn and bring my spin on it. And one of the things I said to myself as I was going to med school, because I saw so many doctors that I would shadow really have lost themselves to medicine. They're sort of in a miserable job. They're just doing the same thing over and over again. They gained a bunch of weight. They had kids and they're gone. Like they're gone in my eyes. I'm like, you lost the person that was when you started. So I made a commitment to myself that I I would like eat right and exercise and stay fit and like be connected with my family, because I wasn't going to like finish my training and be a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And like, oh yeah, I'm a doctor, I'm cool, but like I've lost every other part of my life. That was unacceptable to me. So I came into it with like a very skeptical eye from the beginning. And as I was just going through training, medical school, the first 2 years were really cool because you just learn a lot of basic science. So a lot of what I'm talking about is taught in medical school basic science. A lot of the low carb stuff, understanding how the Krebs cycle works, something simple like that, and going through all those mechanisms, understanding pathophysiology, what happens when things go wrong and why, like what was the cause of it. It's in there. And what changes on a dime is when you get into clinical medicine. When you get into those second 2 years where you start practicing and you start like telling people what to do and ordering things, and that the recommendations that you're taught to give from the American Heart Association, from the college of this or that, or the health institutes, those things did not match the science I had learned. And I picked up on that right away. Those things were driven by research studies on this drug or that drug, or this like epidemiological evidence that was like from 50 years ago that had never been followed up with any bench work. So I immediately started like being and I feel like very sensitive to the person in front of me. I feel them. I can feel the person, whether they're happy, sad, sick. Like I can just, there's a vibe like when you look at someone. So I immediately, as I started seeing patients as a young medical student, like getting good at like helping people, giving them a recommendation based on the person that was in front of me, not the recommendation that was taught to me. So I immediately was stepping away from the recommendations. And then I went through residency as an internal medicine resident, and it was very much like, this is the problem, these are the criteria, this is the recommendations. And I accepted that, actually. I was like, okay, this is cool. Like they've done all this research. This is what you do. Cool. Like, let's go rock and roll. And I started doing that. And then the next year, the recommendation changed to something dramatically different than what I was recommending. And I was like, hold on. They're making this shit up as we're going along. They're literally making it up. They're saying that we know. And then the next year they're saying, well, now we know this. And so it just made me go like, well, what about everything else that people talk about? So you're saying all of my naturopathic colleagues, sure, they can be kooky, but like they're crazy. They're completely wrong. I don't think so. I think they're learning some pretty meaningful stuff. All of the Chinese medicine, all of the stuff that my mom, like I said, when I was really young, would talk to me about, all that stuff is wrong. Like really, the liver pate is bad for me. Like I'd ask myself these questions long before I ever discovered any kind of like personal approach to healthcare or nutrition or any of that. And I quickly got the reputation in my training as like the complainer. And I was like, I'm not complaining, everyone. I'm asking meaningful questions. So because I was in the hospital medicine, you don't really, the food and nutrition, it's not even a part of it. It's whatever shit the cafeteria gives them. You order a low carb diet, you order a heart healthy diet, it's all the same junk. It's just junk. We never talked about it. We never looked at it. I never took a bottle of Glucerna or Ensure and turned it around and saw what chemicals were in there. It was never on my radar. So I ended up really focusing on end of life care, because I was like, well, here's a place that we have done so little effort, like doctors are so uncomfortable with it, and there's done so little effort that my interpersonal skills immediately let me give good, meaningful medicine, because I was like, oh, well, I understand like what a human being needs to support them in this situation. And then, there's a lot of great research coming out that was very humanistic and very like lifestyle medicine. Like we should just support them. We should do hospice. We should give them pain medicines. We should, let them eat whatever they want. Like we should give them the freedom and the dignity of dying without being a tube stuffed down their mouth. I really connected with that. And that's where I sort of like flowered in residency as a doctor. I think that's where I was like, oh, I'm particularly good at this. Almost did that as a specialty, but I just really was, by the end of it, I was like so like disgusted with Western medicine and training and how they treat residents and how people were coming out like with these accolades, but they really didn't know what they were doing, or they really thought they knew what they were doing, but themselves were really unhealthy. And it was just all very like, this isn't right. Like there's something wrong with this. So I went off and just got a job in a hospital, and I started my own private practice because of my parents. And I was like, I don't know what the hell is going to happen. I'm Brent. I had no idea what was going to happen. I was like, evolve healthcare. Yeah, I'm going to evolve my way of thinking about it. But I had no clue where that would take me. I just knew that what I was taught and what I was doing in the hospital and what I was being trained to do in the clinic was like not helping people. It just wasn't helping people.
Yeah.
It was making money. It was kind of turning the wheels of the machine.
Of the machine. Yeah. It's staying in the same cycle that's just been perpetuated years and years and years.
And that's just not my game. Like it never was. I have this punk rock attitude. Like I'm going to make my decision. I'm going to do what I think is right. I'm smart. I can learn stuff. I can read stuff, and I can change my mind. So even if I decide today, just like they can change their mind about their recommendations, just like Johnson & Johnson was the best vaccine, now it's the worst vaccine, now this vaccine, just like they keep changing, I get to keep changing. Yeah. I am a smart person. I'm a scientist. I'm a doctor. I'm a human.
And medicine should be evolving, right?
That's what it always was.
Yeah, it should always be evolving with new practices, especially as it's so subjective based on who the person is or the patient is. And now the stuff you're doing is super different. Like you're doing psychedelic therapy.
Hoping to do psychedelic. We had a psychedelic assisted psychotherapy program with ketamine before COVID that unfortunately I couldn't keep it up. So we're still working really hard because I believe.
But it's an interest of yours.
Passion. It's a passion. I think,
cool.
I think ketamine, psilocybin, MDMA, as well as other things like ibogaine. There's other medicines that can really heal people. Iboga.
Do you know about Iboga?
Yeah.
Oh, shit, I was half joking.
Yeah, no, ayahuasca has a role.
Isn't Iboga the frog one? The toad?
I think that's the toad one.
The toad poison.
No, no. Isn't the toad the 5-MeO-I?
I think it's Iboga. It might be both, but I just know Iboga is something to do with a frog or a toad.
Yeah, I've stayed. So some of those more extraneous ones. I'm more personally. I'm more focused on the things that I could bring to patients in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, which would
that
be
is ketamine, MDMA, and psilocybin.
Cool.
Those are 3 drugs that are extremely powerful, have tons of great evidence to support their benefit.
Yeah.
The evidence is just coming out now through the VA and other studies that are ongoing, the MAPS program.
Yep.
So that's where I want to, other people can talk about some of those other things. I think those 3 drugs are meaningful. Look, we have ketamine programs all around the country already. MDMA is not far away. They're decriminalizing psilocybin. These things are happening.
Yeah. That's huge.
But more importantly, to kind of really answer your question, I realized that despite all of my best efforts, when I would follow recommendations, I would get, if I'm not working out 2 hours a day, I would get unhealthy. I would start feeling the effects of life, and I always frustrated me. And I was always open-minded to learning new things. And about 4 or 5 years ago, me and one of my best friends, Brian Sanders, at Food Lies, he started going down his own journey because his family was sick and he didn't want to be sick, and we started learning and reading books, and it just all unfolded. And why I don't emphasize all the evidence-based medicine is because there's a whole community of very smart physicians and scientists doing the research and promoting this stuff. I think that if you're really going to get through to people, if you're really going to touch, and I like to dream big. I want to touch as many people as possible. Most people don't understand what it means to have a double-blind placebo-controlled study, and they really shouldn't, because there's so many caveats to science. What you can connect with is history. We all have our great-great-grandfathers and where they're from. We all know we can read a history book and learn about our history. We can all also feel our bodies, right? So when someone tells you to eat a bunch of fiber and you feel bloated, that should tell you something. And if I can suggest fasting and then you fast and you feel great, that's all it takes, really. So I try to come at all this stuff from an approach of what does every human can connect with. And I think history, our ancestry, our kind of mind, body, spirit access of how all this stuff connects. That's where I think I can have a voice and really connect with people, because I can refer you to books and podcasts where they talk about each individual research thing and why fasting is so great and why cold immersion is so great and why this plant is bad and why meat is good and why the argument against meat is bad.
Yeah.
It's it's an argument. I'm not trying to argue here. I'm trying to show people that there's a way to think about life, like vaccines, like food, like going out and smiling at your neighbor, like just all this stuff. You can think about it in a more humanistic way, in a more evolutionary way, in a more ancestral way, where you could connect with, again, like your ancestors and the past and the stories you heard from your grandma. You know, there's this thread that connects it all, and that thread leads towards the kind of recommendations I recommend. And that's not sitting on your couch and eating processed food.
Yeah.
It's like going on a run and sitting in the sun. We didn't even talk about how important sun exposure is. And vitamin D,
you know, vitamin D.
Like all these things, you know, like we were meant to be in the sun and slowly get sun exposure over the year and build up your melanin so you don't get sunburned, but you can continue to make high amounts of vitamin D, a hormone that drives your immune system and your gut health and your brain health. All this stuff was minimized during my training. Just like vitamin D is nothing, you know, you got to eat more frequent, like just so much. I don't know if it's bad information, if it's propaganda. It's just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to and every year, hopefully people that are listening to this podcast hear like a more dialed version. Because I think last time I was really like trying to give the details of fasting, kind of getting into it.
That was a main topic. Yeah.
What I want people to take away is that there's a way to think about health and the world that can help steer you to keep your health and keep your sanity as this world is getting weirder and weirder.
Yes.
And I do think that all the cool crypto, like decentralized metaverse stuff, it's weird. And we've got to be prepared, because in the end of the day, there's still a human body sitting behind that VR screen of the computer. And if you can, you know, take an hour a day to dial in your, you know, have that morning routine, have that sprinting session, eat the right way, then you could probably sit in your VR headset and crush it doing whatever games or whatever the hell you're going to do in there, but still take care of your body in a meaningful way. Like, I don't want us to be that like idiocracy society where they're all just plugged in and eating all the shit and the world's falling apart and everyone forgot about the past. I mean, that movie really touched on like the basic concept of what I'm talking about, is that we just need to look at history and integrate it into what we know now to make a meaningful lifestyle change that will keep you healthy forever. You do not need to depend on 10 pharmaceutical drugs to be healthy. Yeah. You can use magnesium and adaptogenic mushrooms and vitamin supplements and food supplements and exercise habits and sleep habits to be super freaking healthy. Like really, really healthy. Feel really fucking great. But you gotta see through the bullshit, because what's being sold to you and what makes money right now is chronic disease. Yeah, that's the industry. That's the $1 billion game, baby, is pills. Let me push these pills and shots on you. Let me ask you this, moving out of the historical context, because that's awesome, and into the present, in a COVID age, as we're going to have another pandemic. There just will be. I mean, the winter might be ugly with just COVID. The winter could be ugly with COVID-21. Who knows? You know, who knows what Bill Gates is planning. Now, joking. Or is he? Or is he? My wife thinks that it's like a double-double. He's like lying and lying twice to really manipulate. Oh, my God. It's so funny how he became this evil. Like this Mr. Burns. Sorcerer. Like Mr. Burns. Totally. I'm going to block the sun. Totally. Like, oh, my God. That's weird, though. That's weird. That the Simpsons predicted what Bill Gates. The sun blocking thing is very sketchy. Very funny. No, I think it's funny. We will not get into that. No, no. But my question is, as we move, like that's now I understand your perspective in a historical context, and as we're now in this age of pandemics where we will have more for sure, and we will continue to be scared of like little things that pop up, but like bird flu, mad cow disease, SARS. H1N1, the mosquito thing, all the little pop-up things that popped up. Yeah. Like when those little things pop up now, they're going to be treated like another pandemic. Yeah. We're just immediately going to default to lock your doors. There's a scary bug out there that could kill you. So as we continue moving into this psycho world, and you're watching people like Fauci and other leading like minds of medicine continue to talk to people, and to me, they're moving goalposts. The goalposts continue to move. But what do you, as a doctor, think that we're not being
told enough? Like, what is missing from this communication? I'm going to guess you're going to say things such as vitamin D, healthy immune system, things like that. But even like kind of beyond that, like what contextual information do you think we need more of as we move into this space of fear and disease and viruses, and that's just going to continue to come up?
This is going to be a pretty morbid and maybe unpleasant answer.
Okay. Hit me.
I think that people need to understand that death is a part of life, that like people die. We are so disconnected from death that, you know, this idea that 6 people got really sick from, you know, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or this number of people that died, it's so scary. But if you start really looking at the numbers of how many people are dying from other disease processes, diabetes, cancer, it's like astronomically higher than COVID. And it's because we're so disconnected from death that people don't understand what life is. So I think it was just crossing my mind the other day. I just think people need like a rude awakening of like, death is a part of life. There's people dying every day from heart attacks and dementia. And yeah, when you don't see grandma for 6 months, she's sitting in a fucking room in a nursing home and she's not seeing anyone and she's losing her mind. And that's the reality of the society we set up. And she's going to die. And when she dies, you shouldn't throw the kitchen sink of stuff at her to save her life for a few days when you've seen her twice in the year and you're afraid she's going to die. She's going to die. So there's this idea of like, live life with intention, live life with urgency, and not be so worried about anything that's going to happen, because your chances of getting hit by a car when you're on the street is super high too. Like bad shit happens all the time. So live life with intention and urgency and use every day to like improve yourself. Like have the attitude that every day you spend choosing to be unhappy. Now, like bad shit happens to people. I'm not saying everyone doesn't need to be unhappy, but a lot of people choose to just be frustrated and unhappy. It's often a choice. It's often a choice to not go outside and take care of yourself. It's often a choice to wallow your sorrows in a bowl of ice cream. These are choices we make, and to understand that you can make choices to be happy, and you can make simple, free, often choices to be healthy. And that is the key to like sustainability and happiness. It's not a pill. It's not a game. It's not a mask. It's not a vaccine that's going to make it's being happy and healthy and living each day with that goal, this drive to make yourself better and make yourself healthier. And my concept about leveraging acute stressors are tools to do that. So what would I tell people is this model of like managing the chronic stress of COVID and fear and more bad things that are coming our way, which they're coming and they're coming and they're coming with more people and more uncertainty and more technological changes and different cultures and generations. Like there is a bunch of shit going on. It's really stressful. It's really difficult, but it doesn't cost a lot to manage those things on a personal level.
Yeah, because it feels like a lot of people are trying to mitigate the risk at the expense of life, kind of.
There you go.
You know, like they're like you try to mitigate risk, but the expense is your freedoms, your freedom of thought, your intellectual sovereignty, because you're just agreeing with everything you see and hear. And it comes at the expense of living your life the most happy and free you can be. Whereas I think there's a way to mitigate risk and live freely. Like, I'll wear a mask at fucking Whole Foods, dude. Like, fine. I can't wait for that shit to be over. I don't think it should still be happening. But I'm also not going to, like, shudder in fear as somebody unmasked walks towards me, because then I would literally be giving up my happiness. Yeah. That is an unhappy way to live. And so I just hope that we can move into a space where we're not mitigating, mitigating the risk of dying at the expense of everything, you know?
I just had a thought, and this is kind of like what we're trying to say, is like the fear mongering is so real and it's so negative and bringing us down so much. And my answer to you was like being aware of death. It's because for all the fear about COVID and what could happen, there's a lot more bad shit and death happening around us all the time that you're not being fear-mongered on. And if we were more honest with each other and ourselves, and media was more honest about what's really going on as a society, as our population grows, as like obesity rates skyrocket.
How many people die from heart disease every year?
I'm not way more than COVID. I had a
That's
great.
true,
I
right?
have it. Yeah. Oh my God.
Can we look this up actually?
Metabolic Mike has this great. He does a lot of this content. Did I save the picture? Are we gonna?
Yeah,
we're gonna. You paused it.
No. I didn't pause it. We're still going.
Everyone's having a great time.
Oh, we're having a great time
while we look.
Yeah, but young Jamie's gonna look this up. Or are you looking it up right now?
We are both can try to look it up.
How many people die from heart disease? Not this year, because every death was a COVID death. 655,000 Americans die from heart disease each year. 1 in every 4 deaths in America is from heart disease. Major risk factors include tobacco smoking and hypertension.
So yeah, and here's
I didn't know it was that high, bro. That's crazy.
It's crazy. So it's crazy, and so this is from JAMA. This is a JAMA article published
mine was CDC, by the way.
Yeah, this is JAMA. I think this is CDC data. No, this is leading causes of death, U.S. 2020, published in JAMA, Journal of American Medicine. So this year we had heart disease, almost 700,000 deaths, cancer. 600,000 deaths, COVID, 345,000 deaths.
I thought COVID was 500,000.
345,000 in 2020.
Wow.
From this data. Unintentional injuries, 190. Unintentional injuries,
190,000?
Right? Stroke.
Got to stop stepping on rates.
And so this is something interesting too. When you look at this data, you're like, well, heart disease is twice as much as COVID, but 345 is really still a lot for COVID. And I agree with that. However, once you start looking down
at the specific data, you're going to talk about the demographics of the people and who.
But just get this. If you take metabolic disease, so this is breaking it up based on whatever they decided to break it up, how it's reported. Mm-hmm. I would argue that COVID is this infectious disease that's scary, and I get it. Cancer is now being proven to be a metabolic disease, right? Yes, there's genetic causes of cancer, but a lot of it is your metabolism is broken and you can't kill or get rid of these cancer cells, and so cancer grows and cancer rates are sky high. And there's a lot of new evidence coming out that it's all a metabolic disease. Not all, a lot of it is a metabolic disease. But even if you don't count cancer, you take heart disease, you take stroke, you take chronic lower respiratory diseases, which is often comorbid with metabolic disease or smoking, Alzheimer's disease, which is definitely a metabolic disease, diabetes, kidney disease. So if you take those, so that's 700,000 plus 200,000 plus another 150. So the number of deaths from metabolic disease compared to infectious disease, so if you add like COVID-19 and influenza, is about 400,000, and the number of deaths from metabolic disease is millions.
Damn.
When you just add up these numbers. So that's taking the chart.
Wow.
That's taking the chart and going one step further. Instead of just looking at the one data point, you're saying, okay, well, if I gather the metabolic diseases versus the infectious diseases, which is what we're all staying at home and freaking out and wearing masks about, those numbers don't even compare. Yeah. It's not even it's not even on the same scale. It's millions versus hundreds of thousands.
And then if I were to extrapolate that data one step further, would this be a factual thing thought to have? Even the people who died from infectious diseases, a high percentage of them likely had metabolic issues because that's such a big comorbidity factor.
The number was crazy. It was like 94 or 97% of people died from COVID. The average comorbidities was 2.7.
Yeah.
So that means most people, by far the majority of it, had 2 or 3.
Right. And obesity is one of those.
Hypertension, diabetes. Heart disease.
Yeah.
So then you might argue that it's all metabolic disease.
Right.
Right? Like it's all metabolic.
High percentage. Yeah.
It's
and though that
extremely
doesn't
high.
Include being over 80, Because when you add the amount of people, because being over 80 we don't treat age like a disease,
right?
But it kind of is.
Right.
If you really want to start getting into the weeds, dude, aging is a disease. Which is a weird thing to say, I know, but don't fucking cancel me for this in the future. Or if you do, fuck off. And so
there's a lot of anti-aging doctors
include,
that agree with you, by the
dude,
way.
when you include people that are over 80 in those percentages, it changes everything. And this is part of my biggest frustration of the past year is we're treating this like it doesn't matter who you are. Neil deGrasse fucking Tyson, dude, had a TikTok that said COVID does not... it doesn't, what's that word where you're choosing who to fuck with? It doesn't, discriminate. Neil deGrasse Tyson said COVID doesn't discriminate. And it blew my fucking mind, dude, because when you look at numbers and scientific data, it is so discriminatory. And that's the information that we don't get from our health officials that are on TV every night. We don't get from these people. They're not sharing that information. And instead, it's creating this groupthink mentality that's making people so fucking afraid for the wrong reasons. Whereas we could be focusing all of our intentions on helping the people that are actually vulnerable. Like, it's too late to maybe give a 300-pound person with diabetes and asthma. It might be too late for a lot of these people. But let's try to help them. Let's give them free Amazon grocery delivery so they don't have to go to a store. And then the rest of us can just live our lives. Instead of deciding what business is essential. You're going to tell me my business is not essential?
You know what's an essential business?
What I mean?
Yeah, you know what's an essential business is all the food companies and all the people that use wheat, corn, and soy. Right. And that's why when I hear from my colleagues in the hospital, because I don't go to the hospital anymore, every single patient I've ever had admitted for COVID has hyperglycemia. They all have a high blood sugar.
This is what you've been told?
Yeah. I have a couple very close friends that have been, it's everyone, all of them, and not a couple. I have 10 doctors that I ask regularly that I talk to. All of them are like, every patient has hyperglycemia. Every patient has, if not diabetes, pre-diabetes, and if not one of those, they're obese and ultimately insulin resistant, so their sugars are sky high.
Yeah.
So maybe the best intervention we could have ever done is say, stop eating sugar.
Yeah.
Right? Forget about what you believe about meat and plants and fasting and blah, blah, blah. Just stop eating sugar. But you know what? Who's paying for the commercials on that news show?
Right.
Who is funding medical colleges? Who are the number one funders of medical colleges, public medical colleges in the country? It's food companies. Food companies by far are wheat, corn, and soy. There's a few meat companies, and they're few and far between, and they're not contributing for a variety of reasons. But the big companies are making cereals. They're making sodas. They're making boxed, processed food. And that is what's causing everyone to be sick. And why don't we say that's what's causing everyone to be sick? Because they're paying money to shut everyone up.
And it's so much easier to say, oh, your small business is not essential because we can't have people mingling together.
It's optics.
And it's like, it's optics. The messaging is wrong. That was my point with what business is essential or not. It's just, it's optics, it's messaging. And it's so fucking sad that it comes down to money at the end of the day.
And that's not a conspiracy theory. Like, I think that it's important for people to understand that I'm going to keep talking about this because it's not a conspiracy theory. This is the reality, right? Like, you can look, it's public knowledge to look and see how much these companies are paying for commercials, who is funding medical schools, who is funding medical education, who is contributing and funding the studies that the drug companies use, who is behind it. It just takes work to look it up. And there's a lot of brilliant people that are exposing it, but it's never going to get mainstream media coverage because those mainstream media companies are paid for by big food and big pharma. Mm-hmm. Big food and big pharma run the game.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm always, nervous when I talk about this, but really, like, I can't ignore it because it just is what it is, And like, the only thing we can do is support smaller companies doing it right, support grocery stores that stock higher quality food items, that promote low carb eating. Look, there's simple shit. I just went to Mexico for my honeymoon. It was awesome. if you take a bottle of Coca-Cola, it's just like covered in labels now that it's an extremely, I forgot the Spanish, but it's an extremely, like an excessive sugar product. Warning, you can't miss it when you grab the bottle of Coke, because they're having a serious problem and they don't have the vice grip that is the corn and soy and wheat and drug company grip. It's not as powerful like there. That's why, for example, we use high fructose corn syrup here. They use sugar, because you should probably just use sugar and not a weird processed corn to like sweeten things. But they have these diabetes and obesity, and at least they're labeling their food. You'll never see that here, because it's impossible to get through. And so, yeah, that's why I'm out here talking about this stuff. That's why, like, every conversation, I always try to tie it back to this, because it's all kind of simple.
Yeah.
It's kind of simple. Take out the weird sugar stuff. Take out the weird grain stuff. Embrace real natural food, which is animal foods, and you'll be healthier.
Yeah.
And you'll just be healthier. But getting in an argument about plant-based protein versus this protein versus the environmental impacts on the red meat has versus corn. It's like you're in the weeds. You can manipulate data. There's so much bullshit to it. It's not that complicated to be like, everyone is dying from hyperglycemia. Yeah. Like, people are really, really, really sick from these things. And then you can get into some of the more, like, I think, you got to understand it more, but like vegetable oil, like seed oils, processed seed oils are just poisonous, and they're really, really bad for us. And we're just starting to figure out why. And even the companies that make those oils know that, and they're always trying to modify the oils to make them a little healthier. So if you're selling a good product, why are you always trying to modify it to make it less poisonous? So yeah, that's a whole different conversation, but just understanding that, like, you can be happy and healthy without spending a shit ton of money. You just need to make thoughtful decisions and accept that a lot of what you've been taught is wrong, and that there is now a world of information that you can just open your mind and learn about and find what makes sense for you.
Yeah, and do the research and don't live by the headlines. A lot of people live by headlines today.
And get out of the bubble of, like, if you're like, you've been vegetarian or vegan, like, actually search the other stuff, because the social media and the search and like the platforms, they're just going to feed you the thing they know you already like. Yeah. So then you just get caught in a cycle. So I intentionally follow influencers from other kind of, schools of thought, so that I could see where people's heads are at. Mm-hmm. Like, I'll look at Fox News, and I'll look at CNN, and I'll look at NPR. I'll look at all of them to kind of get a pulse on, like, what is the nation thinking? What are the ideas that are trying to being promoted to us? Yeah. And when you do that, then you start seeing through the lines, and you're like, well, this is really scary. This is really happening. How come, like, that news media doesn't even have it on their front page? Like, they don't even want to talk about it. Right. It just gets weird, and you realize that it's all just like a manipulation, and what forces are involved, and who's really interested in, like, promoting some idea or not promoting some idea. It's like, I don't know. Like, I'm not a QAnon. Here's all like, it's not the point. The point is like, just don't buy what's fed to you. Yeah. Think about it. Be thoughtful. Find a good, person that then says, go read this book or go listen to that podcast. And it's like, explore, go on your journey, Yeah.
I love that.
It's all there.
Listen to this podcast, baby.
Listen to the Brent Pella show.
Podcast, bro. Man, that feels like a great place. That was great. Do you feel good?
I feel great. That was a lot more serious, I think, than
but
I hope you guys don't think I'm just serious. I can bullshit.
No, we needed this. Okay. I needed this. Yeah, this is more for me than it is for anyone else. Is there anything that we didn't touch on? Because we're hitting the 2-hour mark, and I feel pretty good.
No, I mean, we covered so much. I just, there's so much information out there, and my goal is for people to learn. If people are excited about anything I'm talking about, I have a great podcast called the Sapien Podcast. Yes. And we're getting a bunch of love for it. I co-host it with Brian Sanders, and we have lots of really smart people on, and we try to do a lot of, like, kind of these kind of conversations. We have a Peak Human podcast, which has the world's leading scientists talking about nutrition, and that's all about food and nutrition. So if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, listen to the Peak Human podcast. And if you really want to, learn more from me, you can make an appointment with me through Evolve Healthcare at evolvehealthcare.com. You can call the office. I do consults. You can reach out to me at drgaryevolve.
on Instagram.
You could message Brent and say, who is that handsome doctor?
Say, hey, who's that doctor that sounded like he knows a lot about mushrooms? Does he have a plug?
Yeah.
Gary, I love you, bro.
Love you, Brent.
Thanks
this
for
is so
hanging,
great.
dude. Hell
And
yeah.
congratulations on this new studio. This is
Thank you
really
so much.
amazing.
Thank you.
It really is lovely.
We're taking steps toward having a future where my student loans are paid.
You have a very bright future,
surely.
my friend.
Thank you,
You're
man.
very, very, very
Thanks,
good.
dude. Bright and healthy.
Yes.
That's our future. All right, everybody.
Thank
Love
you.
ya. See ya.
Bye.
And that's it, man. Thank you guys so much for cruising and hanging and banging and chilling. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the podcast channel on YouTube. Subscribe on all the things, iTunes, Spotify, whatever all those things do. Support the brands that support the podcast. That's Bioptimizers, Cognibiotics.com/Brent Pella, and BlueBlocks, BlueBlocks.com/Brent. Both of these companies support me and allow me to continue doing the things that I do without having to be another person living in a tent in California. So please support the brands, the folks who support me. And follow Gary, Dr. Gary Evolve on Instagram, and Evolve Healthcare, Sapien Podcast. All his stuff is amazing. Keep up with him and keep up with yourselves, man. Take care of your body, you know what I mean? Be healthy. Now's the time to be healthy and happy, not angry and poopy, okay? Don't be angry, don't be poopy. Be happy, be healthy, and drink some water, all right? I'll see you guys next week. Bye.